Hi, you guys. How are you? It's nice to be with you again. I was going to say see you, but I can't really see you through the camera, but I feel like I can. Um, this is the live stream show, but safe stream version is what I mean to say. And it's the version that's set for YouTube so that we don't offend any terms of service or community guidelines or anything like that. But I felt like, what can I start saying that is not just silly stuff, where I'm saying the opposite of what I mean, but something with some substance and still keep it short because we have to get ready for the live show, which is in 26 minutes right now, the real live show, which I hope you'll join. Go to lostartsradio.com/live and you can see how to connect there to other platforms. But I thought, all right, looking at all the things that are happening in the world, what I wanted to just bring up, what is the influence of us on what's going on. And usually people are aware of the level where you go out to a protest, which is really important. And there's a incredibly important one happening in Canada right now with support from people all over the world. We're going to talk about it a lot on the Lost Arts Radio live show. But in general, all of these important physical actions that can be taken, what determines or really affects the outcome of what's going to come out of that is the consciousness of the people behind it. And that's not something that gets censored on the internet because they figure, well, that's just a bunch of new age silly talk and it doesn't really mean anything. In fact, it'll keep people distracted and wrapped up in these imaginary consciousness realms while we take over the world. And so that's great. They let us say whatever we want. And it's not the silly thing that they say it is. There's some great, really physically practical power that's accessible there for you as an individual that changes everything you do, the impact of it. And the thing is, we're out of touch with it. And I can't go into it in a lot of detail here, but just going to give you a few outside of the box perspectives, I think. The thing is, you've heard people say the opposites are love and fear, right? For your state of mind. But the thing is, what's the reality behind that? And what you see in world history, we've lived in the fear frequency for so long that it's kind of hard to remember anything else. Just variations of fear, different degrees of it. Sometimes it backs off a little bit. But the question is, what's our normal state? What does that actually feel like? And I'm not talking about theories and beliefs at all, because you can stay in the same fear state and have any belief you want, and you go below the surface and you know what frequency is going into whatever you do, and it's what you're broadcasting. So I'm talking about what our normal state that we've forgotten, that would end all this stuff, the crimes going on in the world. What does it feel like? And getting back to that, not in a belief, not in a new religion or something, and experientially, that would end most of the unpleasantness that's happening in the world right now. And it's hard to imagine that, but from what I've seen, I think it's true. And the world that it would end the negative events in is the so-called real world that we think is solid and on a deep level that quantum physics barely touches. It's not solid, and it's affected by what's being broadcast on an energy level, on a frequency level. And again, it's easy to think, well, that's just, silly woo-woo stuff. And the scientists that have really gone deeply into it, and many have been ostracized from conventional scientific establishment, have found out it's not crazy. And the so-called real world is changeable, not just by what we do physically, but what we do in our internal state. And you've probably heard people talking about what's called manifesting, and they usually put it in terms of, if you want typical example is a new car or a new house or a perfect husband or wife or job situation or whatever it is, then you do what's called affirmations on one level. There was a guy named Dick Sutphen who did a lot of this in the 70s, made a lot of sales of cassette tapes saying things to yourself like, I am rich, or I have what I want, I have a perfect relationship or whatever. But what a lot of people missed about that, it wasn't nonsense. It's just that it doesn't do anything if you just say the words. You have to actually be in the feeling of it, and that takes a little bit deeper work than just saying the words over and over again. And again, two groups of people respond differently to this whole idea. This is not unrelated to world events. This is directly related to world events in a way that people don't usually recognize. And there's two groups that react to it. One is saying, that's ridiculous. We got to go out and do some real stuff. Lie down in front of the tanks, which sometimes does have to be done, but they consider that real, and what you do internally is not real. That's missing the main driving force that determines the future and the present. The other group says, well, that sounds really neat. At least I'd like to have a good relationship or a new car, but I wish I could do it, but I can't do it. And it's kind of humorous, both of those reactions, because the ones that think it's ridiculous and the ones that wish they could do it are both masters at it, but they're doing it 24 hours a day unconsciously. And if you want to know what all of us are focused on manifesting, look around and what's happening, both in your personal life and in the world in general. That's not disconnected from our internal state, and we've almost completely lost track of that. It seems irrelevant or untrue. But if you look around in your personal life, the idea is that is what is affecting it the most strongly. Not what you think you believe, but what you really believe on an emotional level. If you look at every detail of your own life, including all the actors in your projected movie that you call your life, like I think they call them other people. Those are characters in your movie, and you wrote their script. So, assuming no responsibility for any of that, and none of this is possible, that I'm just talking complete nonsense, leaves you powerless. And we've seen that cycle playing out for tens of thousands of years, at least, maybe longer. Sometimes there's a sign that what people are unknowingly projecting is changing. And we're seeing that now in Canada. And it's just a little clue of what could happen. It's not violence. Violence is showing you don't get it. Because reacting violently against the evil power structure in this particular situation would mean that it gives them, especially with their ownership of the mainstream media, gives them the justification to come back much worse. But as Gandhi discovered in India when he was trying to get rid of the tyrants from the UK at the time, if you're not violent, but you're really strong and you're focused and you do what you're not allowed to do, which is actually something good, the powers that be can't do anything. And it worked at that time in India. An example was that the British made a law or a rule, I guess it was a law, that only British people could be in charge of collecting salt out of saltwater bodies like the ocean and places like that. And if you were a lowly Indian person, I'm talking about in India, of course, then you weren't allowed to do any of that. So a group got together and they said, no matter what they do to us, we're not going along with that ridiculous rule. We have the right to do these things, and I'm assuming they understood the right was from God or spirit, not from government. And they went and started a long line of men, very brave, started carrying, I think they were carrying containers on their heads, and they were walking down in the line to the water's edge to collect the salt water for evaporation to make salt. And the police were there, and they had clubs, and they started beating up the men in the line. Some of them were knocked unconscious, may have been killed, I don't know. And they just kept going. And it was confusing to the police. And they were probably thinking, wait a minute, you're supposed to stop and apologize and grovel. And they just kept going and going and going. And this attitude, this understanding of complete nonviolent non-compliance with false authority works. And this is what they've started to figure out now in Canada after suffering for 2 years really intensely, but longer than that in other ways, of ridiculous rules being made in the name of health that everybody's supposed to be intimidated into following. And they finally just crossed the line and they said, okay, nobody who's driving a truck can leave Canada, cross any of the borders, without being injected with something that might kill you. And the truckers thought, many of us are smart enough not to let any so-called health authority do that to us. And you're not going to take away our livelihood and destroy the food supply of Canada. And they said, let's all go to Ottawa, the capital in Ontario. And they've been driving from the West Coast and the East Coast and the North all over Canada. And they're getting into Ottawa now. So they need support because, the tyrant in Ottawa, he's probably wondering what to do. He's been hiding. His first strategy was to go hide. And I think he's still doing that. But he's probably talking to advisors, thinking about, let's see, it's really cold outside there. It's like it was minus 20 last night, centigrade, which is about minus, I don't know, 5 or 6 or something like that, Fahrenheit. And maybe he's thinking they'll just all freeze to death and we can wait them out, or they'll run out of food and fuel. And from a military perspective, that peaceful army that is now in the capital trying to remind the tyrants, this is our country. It's not your country. We're not your servants. We're not your subjects. We're your bosses. And we put you there with our consent to protect our individual freedoms and our borders. And that's the only reason you're there. And you've transgressed and, forsaken that rightful authority. We're here to straighten you out. And this is a big showdown. And the people of Canada all over the country, as the convoys were going to Ottawa, were standing all over the overpasses and cheering. And the tyrant in Ottawa was saying, this tiny fringe group doesn't represent the people at all. This is a criminal in office. And it's going to be really interesting to see, but not to just observe, but to do two things. And then I've got to go get ready for the main show. Financial support should go not to, this is really tricky because the criminals have infiltrated so many of the institutions and companies, and the company that they've been using to collect money for the truckers, which I think is like $6 or $8 million so far, has decided to block it because it's not what their bosses are telling them to accept. This is a criminal charity organization. I don't want to name it right now because I don't want to be kicked off immediately. But they've been shutting down causes that are good because they don't go with the New World Order's plans. So nobody should give money to that one. Some good, the organizers need to switch, if they haven't already, to some good company like Give, Send, Go. And as soon as they do that, everybody should be donating to support those truckers, because they need food and fuel and heat. Whatever they need needs to be supplied by the people en masse. So that's one way. The other is, that's even more powerful actually, but they both need to be done, is become aware of the emotional state that you're living in, what you're imagining. We'll talk more about that in Planetary Healing Club today, planetaryhealingclub.com. But it's very powerful. I'll just say a couple of quick clues. People who are afraid all the time and think that people are attacking them, people attack them. It's not by chance. People are expecting everybody to be untrustable and nasty and vicious. They meet a lot of those kind of people. If you change, I know this sounds impossible, but if you change the feeling you walk around in, not become oblivious to what's going on in the world, because you have to strategically respond to that, be in the truckers' convoy or whatever it is for you. But that doesn't mean you walk around in fear, hatred, thinking how horrible the bad people are. If you want to become strong, you don't fall for any of that, and start to become aware of what you walk around in. It's really critical for the rest of your life, for your future. And it's almost never talked about, and it's real. So anyway, support the truckers, and you can do that outwardly. You can also do it by what you're imagining. And the whole population of the planet right now has a little bit of imagining of something better arising, and you see it come up in physical events, which we'll talk about more on the main show and in Planetary Healing Club. But there are signs of real bright spots right now, and what's happening in Canada is incredible and needs to be taken as valuable inspiration by everybody, supporting them in actions, but also in spirit. We become strong internally. Nobody's going to support the tyrants, and all their plans are going to fall apart. And in fact, they're going to start changing. Seems impossible, and it's not. So we'll talk more about it as soon as we have time. Anyway, I just wanted to mention something real that maybe you don't hear every day, and ask you to consider it. Instead, it's real easy to watch and judge everything around you that's going on, which you need to do, but people are usually oblivious of what they're carrying around, and we're broadcasting energies into the atmosphere that are really powerful. And if the whole population's oblivious of that and doesn't know about it, we're missing a tool that's so powerful that the top level rulers they have a lot of fears, and their main fear is that you discover that and use it. So I'm saying, thank the rulers, believe them, and use it. Discover it and use it. It's in yourself. It's not somewhere else. And we can talk more if you're interested. So anyway, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Go to lostartsradio.com /live is where the links are, and you can see the main show. Okay. Take care of yourself. Spread the links. Support us financially if you can, but definitely the truckers too. And especially all the billionaires out there. Support the Canadian truckers. They need you right now. The future of the world is hanging in the balance. And if you have billions of dollars and it all falls apart, it's not going to be very useful. So you want to talk about that? I'll talk to you. I don't care if you ever support Lost Arts Radio, but there's some other things that need your attention immediately. And just having a comfortable life is not enough when you're in that situation. Great power, which we all have, comes great responsibility. So don't get distracted. Pay attention. And I'll see you next time. Take care.